At 11 p.m., the night before my wedding, my mother knocked unexpectedly, carrying a silver tray with a steaming cup of tea. In 32 years, she had never brought tea into my room. Yet that night, I heard myself say, "Thank you," and lift the cup for the first sip. Only minutes later, the room began to tilt, the walls drifting farther away. And in that haze, I heard a strange voice out on the porch: "Cut it now, or everything will disappear." The last night before a wedding should be filled with anticipation, laughter, and blessings. Instead, I sat frozen on the old bed with its faded pink sheets, my eyelids heavy, my ears pounding to a peculiar rhythm, not my heartbeat, but the beat of a decision already arranged. Through the blur, I saw my mother open a cabinet and take out something wrapped in a white cloth. The metal glint in her hand wasn't a comb or a hair clip, it was clippers that buzzed once, a short burr, like a cue for something irreversible to begin. And in the second I was about to lose what had always defined me, I had just one thought: why would they choose to do this, right before the day I was about to step into a new life? I woke to the scent of roses drifting in from the back garden, an old Charleston fragrance I thought I'd left behind. The early light, thin as chalk dust, touched the curtains. I raised my hand to smooth my hair out of habit and touched a cold, empty space. My scalp was bumpy, stinging as if scratched raw. Every sound in the house went mute, leaving only my own breathing, short and jagged. I jolted upright. On the pillow lay clumps of black hair, slick like spilled ink. The mirror on the wall reflected a stranger. The eyes were still mine, but above them was a surface stippled with reddened follicles, ragged cuts slashing across the crown. I moved toward the bathroom, fingers trailing the wall to steady myself like someone stepping off a swaying boat. The light flipped on. Illumination stripped away any doubt. It couldn't have been an accident. The clipper's teeth had tracked along my temple. Some patches were shaved close, others stuck up about half an inch. I turned the faucet. Cold water rushed over me, dragging a burning trail down my nape. The little cabinet by the sink held only an old lipstick, rusty bobby pins, and a faded note. When I closed it, my fingertip brushed a thin smear of adhesive still tacky along the edge. A knock, then my mother pushed in without waiting. "You're up, Valerie?" She stood behind me in the mirror. Ivory silk robe, hair neatly pinned, a light green perfume. Her gaze skimmed over my scalp like over still water. "You panicked last night and snipped a bit too much. Today we'll put on a wig and it'll all be fine." I turned, leaning against the sink. I didn't cut it, and someone gave me something to drink. Her lips pressed tight, a flinch at the corner of her eye. "Valerie, don't make this heavy. People will arrive early. The church is already set." I looked at her hand along the knuckle. A thin strip of adhesive hadn't dried. She tucked her hand into her pocket. I brushed past her into the hall. Air from the open window swept over my scalp, making me shiver like pricked by needles. The wooden stairs creaked. Coffee and old wood mingled in the air. In the kitchen, my phone lay on the counter. The screen was lit, but the inbox was strangely empty. The call log stopped early. A few chats with my bridesmaids had vanished as if someone hit delete. Howard, my stepfather, sat at the table, dark shirt crisply ironed. He looked up, his eyes landed on my forehead, then slid to my shoulder. "You should cover that," he said evenly. "Guests will be here. People expect a tasteful ceremony." "You know what happened?" I said, not asking. He closed his folder, aligned the edges. "Everyone was tense last night. An unfortunate thing, nobody wanted it. Think of the bigger picture." "I'm thinking of myself," I answered. I opened my photo album. Every trial hairstyle from last week was gone. A folder named Veil Test was empty. It felt like an unfamiliar hand had rummaged through my life and hit delete. Just then, Marissa appeared in the kitchen doorway, pale blue dress, a small box in her arms, eyes glittering a bit too brightly. "Hey," she held the box out to me. "I brought a baseball cap. Wear it to the car, it's sunny." I didn't take it. Where were you last night? She darted a glance at Howard. He gave the faintest shake of his head. At Aunt Carol's, she murmured. We practiced the dance. I stayed over. I set the box on the counter. Then you didn't hear any buzzing. She blinked. Any what? Nothing. I went back to the bathroom for gauze and an anti-inflammatory ointment. Marissa lingered in the doorway like someone standing at the water's edge. I dabbed the stinging cuts. The minty smell cooled, but didn't touch the feeling of being violated. In the mirror, she looked at me through air thick, with everything unsaid. Val, let's not make this big. The whole town's waiting for today. Mom worked so hard. Since when does the whole town get to define who I am on my day? I asked. She fell silent, eyes dropping to her own fingers clenched together. My phone buzzed. Aunt June texted, "You okay?" "I'm in the parking lot. We need to talk." I looked at myself one more time. The shock was gone from my eyes. They'd settled like water after wind. I laid a thin scarf over my head not to hide, just to ease the sting, and headed downstairs. Morning light spread gold across the steps. Aunt June stood by her silver sedan, holding a well-worn tote. She looked straight at me, no flinching, no judgment. "Let's take a drive," she said, low and steady. The tree-lined road led to a small lake. Every white-painted wooden house hung wreaths and flags, a reminder of what people wanted to see: perfect wedding photos, smiles where they belong. She let me start. I told her, the teacup, the bitter taste, the tilting room, the flash of metal in a white cloth, the short burr like a cue. She listened through, then nodded slightly. "I believe you, and there's something you should see." She opened the doorbell app. The porch came into view, the angle skewed toward the doorknob. She scrubbed to just before midnight. Night sounds spread like a blanket. Then, cutting through the insects, a man's voice sliced clean. "Cut it now, or, Magnolia, trust closes the books in the morning." My palms went cold. In the frame, my mother flickered into view, reaching into the cabinet by the door and pulling out something wrapped in a white cloth. The window's edge reflected a round flash of metal like a badge. A steady, metronomic beep sounded. "We don't have microphones," I said. "Riverside Country Club does," she replied. She scrubbed slowly, studying it like a line of difficult verse. My chest thrummed with that strange beep. It wasn't just my mother and maybe Marissa. There was a third person. Someone who knew stages. Who knew which buttons decide things. Stillness. I was born in Charleston, where salt air clings to porch roofs, and the bell at First Harbor Baptist sets the tempo of Sunday mornings like a neighborhood clock. Childhood was whispered dinners and family photos lined up straight on the oak shelf. Then I grew up further in Austin, Texas. Glass towers, hard sun, espresso machines that never sleep. The two cities live in me like two heartbeats, the slow beat of memory, the quick beat of ideas waiting for a name. I work in branding because I want to shape chaos into a story people can understand and feel less tired by. From an unpaid internship brewing coffee, printing packets, fixing slides, I learned when to ask, when to be silent, how to distill an hour of debate into a few lines everyone could nod at. A few years later, I led a team. A few more, I ran the campaigns people saw every morning. The work isn't as glamorous as outsiders think, but the joy is plain, helping an organization find its own voice again. Austin taught me things home didn't. I paid rent on time, took the car in for service, changed bulbs to match a face at 7 a.m. I signed leases, fixed a leaky faucet, swapped out locks when I had to. Peace was sometimes just the shadow of a cactus pot on a living room wall. Every flight back to Charleston, I stepped into a play already staged. I knew where to stand, when to smile, which lines to gloss so dinner would stay smooth. My mother, Lorraine, directed that play by instinct. She remembered every silver plate and tablecloth, knew every household's habits on our block. She's not cruel. She believes appearances are walls that keep whispers out. My stepfather, Howard, is tidy and quiet, living by minutes, budgets, and council calendars. In their world, everything belongs in its place. People can forgive mistakes, but rarely forgive mess. I respect that order as long as it doesn't swallow me. Marissa, my sister, grew up under the warmest light in the house. She's quick, photogenic. I wasn't jealous. Everyone has a stage. What I didn't foresee was how years of making room for her taught her to believe that stage was her birthright. When I worked extra shifts to file college applications, she got her first prom dress. When I settled in Austin, she cycled through 3 jobs in a year and still got praised for finding herself. I learned to love her without erasing myself. I met Daniel at a conference in Denver, where engineers talked about airflow and people like me talked about how to tell the story of airflow to the public. His eyes know how to listen. He stands a little angled, as if leaving more space for my answer. He doesn't promise big things, but he's on time, honest, and has a way of making complicated things simple. Our love isn't loud. It's warm like a yellow kitchen light. On his first trip to Charleston, Daniel stood under the oaks for a long time and said time runs slower here. My mom liked him because he was polite, but I could see the quiet math in her eyes. A home wedding, at the old church, would string relationships together and polish the family image. I had wanted a small Austin ceremony, just a few dozen friends, a simple dinner, a playlist I made. Mom said a daughter should let the family bear witness, and my grandmother was frail and couldn't fly. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Sometimes, coming back is how you keep the people you love. I returned 3 weeks before the wedding with one suitcase, a laptop, and a clean plan. In Austin, I set the calendar. In Charleston, my mother wrote the script. Each day's to-dos arrived by text: lilies or peonies, how to fold napkins, whether anyone at table 5 had nut allergies. I added notes on lighting and sound. Every event is a story that needs rhythm. Mom added a few guest names, people I knew only from her after-dinner anecdotes. First Harbor Baptist is pale brick, sharp roof lines, stained glass scenes. I'd stepped over those steps shaky during exams and steady on windy days. I'm not very devout, but I respect the hush there. Standing in the nave as colored light slanted through the windows, I remembered why I loved the back row as a kid. From there, I could see everything, and nobody stared too hard at me. I wanted the wedding to feel like that, close enough to be warm, far enough to breathe. I don't argue much. I pick the fights worth fighting. When Mom suggested adding a traditional portraits block with a precise list of people and order, I nodded. I only asked to keep control of the reception playlist. She paused, then agreed. In the days after, I stayed in step, morning floral run with Mom, afternoon video calls with my Austin team, late nights checking expenses with Daniel. I was still me, lining up words and lights so they clicked, helping people feel seen. I believe every story has multiple versions, and my fair share is telling mine honestly. If someone wants to add powder and gloss, fine, just don't erase the base layer. My base is years in Austin morning runs over the bridge, nights doing dishes while Daniel talks about airflow meeting a wing's edge. My base is also Charleston, the smell of damp wood after rain, Mom's knuckles tapping when she wants order, Marissa's look when she wants something immediately. Between those bases, I felt steady enough to walk to the aisle in my own stride. No more bowing my head, enough. I still remember that morning air, the Ashley River damp slipping in through a cracked window. The house was dense with antiseptic from the raw skin on my scalp, braided with jasmine from the porch. I sat in the living room, a thin scarf wrapped around my head like a flimsy shield. Mom moved around the kitchen, pots clinking steadily, and Howard sank into the armchair, pretending to read the Sunday paper. Marissa disappeared somewhere, leaving behind an odd hush. My phone trembled in my hand. A text from Aunt June. "We need to talk privately." About the doorbell cam. I lifted my head, scanning the room. Mom looked up, her blue eyes oddly hard. "What is it, Valerie?" I gave a small smile, hiding the screen. "Nothing." Just a colleague in Austin asking about a meeting time. She nodded, not quite convinced. But let it pass. 10 minutes later, I found a reason to step out, said I needed some air. I walked the long hallway lined with family photos under the old oak. Each frame was perfect, as if the Montgomerys had never known a crack. But when I stopped at the front door, my heart hammered. The new doorbell camera's tiny light blinked, like a quiet eye keeping watch over secrets. Aunt June was waiting in the yard, leaning against her familiar silver sedan. When I reached her, she didn't fuss. Just motioned me into the car. We drove to a quiet lot near the riverbank, where wind threaded through the reeds. She opened her scuffed tote and pulled out an iPad patched with layers of tape. "You need to see this," she said, voice slow and sure. The screen lit with footage from the doorbell camera. The angle was tilted, but enough to capture the porch from last night. At first, only darkness, then my mother's figure, trembling like someone who'd lost control. She held a white cloth, something hidden inside. Then Marissa's voice, high and shaking with fury. "If you don't do it, I'll leave tonight. I swear." I held my breath, and before I could react, a jarring detail sliced through the familiar. At the edge of the frame, a man's silhouette slipped in. He stood a few steps from the door, a light-colored suit reflecting the porch light. A low laugh, as if stifled, still rippled through the quiet yard. I shivered. It wasn't Howard, and the voice wasn't any relatives. "Auntie, who is he?" I asked, fists tight on my skirt. Aunt June paused the video and zoomed in. The image was blurry, but on his lapel something round flashed, a badge or a metal pin. The light caught it for only a second, but enough to burn it into my mind. "See? This isn't just about your mother and Marissa. Someone else was involved. Someone they trusted enough to stand on the porch that night," my aunt said. Her voice didn't shake, but in her aging eyes flickered a rare anger I'd seldom seen. I leaned back against the car seat, thoughts crossing over one another. While I was sinking into a drugged haze, my family stood with a stranger to decide to destroy me. It wasn't only blood's betrayal, it was an outside hand directing it. I remembered the strange beep in the recording, small but steady, like a mic check. I'd thought I was dreaming then. Now it rang, crystal clear. Someone who knew audio gear, who knew a stage. He wasn't just watching, he was staging. My aunt powered off the iPad and turned to me. "Valerie, you have a right to the truth. But you also have to understand, if you reveal you've seen this, they'll try to wipe every trace. I'm keeping a copy on a separate drive, but you need to decide whether you want to use it." I bit my lip until it bled. In the rearview mirror, my face stared back, scalp mottled with red, eyes still fogged from sleeplessness. But beneath the exhaustion was a flame that wouldn't go out. "Keep it safe, Auntie. I'll find out who he is. I need to know why he was there." As the car rolled back under the canopy of oaks, I looked at the lit-up houses, flags lifting lightly in the breeze. Outside, the neighborhood was postcard perfect. But I knew behind those white walls were secrets, and I'd just gotten the first piece. Inside, my mother was still on the sofa, holding the guest list book. She looked up when I came in, eyes searching. "Where were you for so long?" I smiled lightly and sat across from her. "I just needed some air. Tomorrow will be long." I kept my voice even, but in my chest, the iPad images kept echoing, frame by frame, sound by sound. Marissa came down the stairs, a thin blue silk dress like a fragile shell. She stopped when she saw me staring. "What's wrong, sis?" she asked, feigning innocence. I didn't answer, only quietly noted the fleeting smile on her lips, a smile that perhaps had shone brighter than the porch light last night. Night fell fast over Charleston. Moonlight glazed the rooftops while I sat by my old bedroom window, eyes fixed on the silent doorbell camera. It felt like a mute witness, holding the moment my family veered onto a road with no return. And now I knew for certain, the truth had many layers, and that third silhouette was only the opening gust of a coming storm. I drew the curtains and took a deep breath. The same questions looped in my head. Why did a stranger have the right to intrude on the sacred disguise? Night before my wedding? Who invited him? And what did they plan to trade for my hair, my honor, and my voice? Noon lay windless, Charleston sunlight dusting the porch. I sat on the edge of the bed, a thin scarf around my head, listening to rehearsal sounds mingled with running water. Aunt June's text still glowed. Don't rush. Find allies first. I called Priya first. Priya, my bridesmaid and friend from our Austin internship, had an audio engineer's ear. She once saved a product launch by catching a hum no one else heard. When she picked up, she asked simply, "Where are you, Val?" I said, "Old room, second floor. I need you and your ears." Priya didn't ask more. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Bringing an audio interface." I went downstairs for water. Howard closed his folder, flicking a glance at the scarf on my head. My mother sliced fruit, the knife tapping evenly on the board. I said, "I'm going upstairs with Priya to check the playlist." She murmured, eyes never leaving the apple peel. Priya arrived on the dot with a bag full of cables. She hugged me quick, then pulled the door nearly shut, clearing the tabletop like she was turning the room into an edit bay. "Give me everything," she said. I transferred the video file from my aunt's iPad along with a cloud backup. Priya put on headphones, opened the software, and slid the faders like opening a dark room's door. Night came alive, insects, wind, then Marissa's voice tearing through it. Priya dipped the mids, raised the highs, set a noise gate. "Listen here," she zoomed in on the waveform at the low laugh. "There's a reflective tail from a hard surface glass, and here, equally spaced points a second apart. A mixer test beep at medium level." "Someone brought gear?" I asked. "At least someone familiar with it," Priya said. "And standing very close to the porch." A chill crawled up my nape. Priya's hand landed on my shoulder. "I'm here. We needed to see the sound lead at Riverside Country Club." I texted Daniel. "We have to check the tech." He replied, "I'll wait in the back lot." The club lobby smelled of polished wood and lilies. On stage, a tall, lean man knelt by the speakers, black tee with a vendor logo. "Nolan?" Priya called. He looked up, nodded. "Hey, Priya." "The bride?" His eyes were direct. "Tell me what you need." I kept it short. We needed to test the system, possibly play a clip, and half a beat's pause make sure no one but us could kill the sound at a crucial moment. Nolan nodded. "Days like this are prone to glitches." He led us backstage, opened the rack, and traced the signal path. Wireless mics, main mixer, a pair of fills, and a separate backup. If someone pulls the main mixer line, the backup still runs. Priya handed over a drive. Nolan plugged into his laptop, listened twice on reference monitors. Priya tapped the waveform. "Hear the beeps?" "Not a microwave or security device. This frequency is an event mixer," Nolan said. "My crew wasn't on duty last night. But this morning." He pulled a plastic bin from under the stage, produced a dusty strip of black gaffer's tape and a stray mic clip. "Someone borrowed the stage late. Security thought it was the sound team. Signed as Reed." My stomach clenched. Aunt June had mentioned a guy on the neighborhood finance committee who always wore a lapel pin. I swallowed. "Can you help me keep the line clean, play only when I signal?" Nolan nodded. "What's the cue?" "When I touch my veil the second time." He wrote it down. "I'll build a separate preset with a password. Only Priya, and I will know it." We tested in a side isolation room. Priya at the laptop, Nolan at the board. I stood in the center and listened, eyes shut, to the very sounds that had chilled me. The night, the beeps, that laugh like brick scraping concrete. I opened my eyes. "Not during the ceremony," I said. "The ceremony stays the ceremony. We play it at the reception when people think the hard part is over." Nolan nodded. "Mid-meal. MC sets up remarks, clip rolls, lights drop. If anyone hits the breaker, the backup comes up. Priya added, and we locked the buttons. I sent Nolan a backup copy via an encrypted folder. He renamed the file Setlist, Piano, B. I exhaled for the first time that morning, my chest eased. In the lot, Daniel leaned against the driver's door. When he saw me, he came over. You okay? We just built a few safety nets, I said. He took my hand. I'm here. We said goodbye to Priya and Nolan. Before leaving, Priya pulled me close. If anything happens, look at me. I'll nod or shake my head. You're not stepping onto that stage alone. I hugged her, the weight on my shoulders lightened. Back home, my mother looked up from the guest list. Where did you go? Sound check, I said. I don't want mic feedback tomorrow. The club handles that, she replied. I poured water. So do I. Afternoon slid by in silence. Florists built the arch outside. Marissa drifted around with gift boxes, smiling softly each time she passed me. I didn't respond. I wrote a note to myself and tucked it in my wallet. Breathe deep. Speak slowly. Don't apologize for the truth. When the sun kissed the water, I stood on the porch, staring at the steps where the camera saw it all. The air carried salt and the marina bell. Allies were in position. Aunt June held the original. Priya listened for what others missed. Nolan kept the light switch waiting for one nod. I didn't know how hard I would shake when the moment came. But for the first time since waking, I saw a straight line to walk, though it ran through a room full of watching eyes. I pulled the porch curtain and went inside. In the soft dark, I untied my scarf and let the breeze touch my scalp like a greeting. A camera shutter clicked somewhere out in the yard, the photographer, maybe, and went quiet. I set my hand on the table, warmth spread into my palm. Not from the sun, but from the sense of a door opening, quietly yet decisively, a door toward the people who would stand beside me when it mattered most. I stood before the mirror, the thin scarf resting on my tender scalp. Late light poured through the curtains, dusting the glass in pale gold. Two paths appeared, a wig to soothe everyone, or step into the light with this exact face so they'd see what they'd done. I don't like theatrics, and I refused to turn my wedding day into a pity play. But when my fingers brushed the cuts, I knew there was only one choice that kept my voice intact: don't hide. I opened the closet and took down the flat box my mother called the soul of the wedding photos. Inside was the cathedral veil. Last month, it felt showy. Today, it looked like a frame where light could hold still, on bare skin. I set it on my head. Threads of tulle fell to my shoulders. I stepped back and looked at myself in the late light. The veil didn't hide me. It softened the truth and made it clear, like a sentence with exactly the right words. Priya knocked, carrying her brush kit. Val, want me to find a cap or headband? I shook my head. No, help me with something else. Don't make me pretty like before. Let my face tell the story. A woman who's been through a storm and remains calm. Priya smiled, opening powders. Okay. Soft matte base. Keep the cheekbones. Brighten the eyes with a small highlight, neutral lips. No false lashes. Everything says one thing: this is real. She worked like a careful glazier, laying thin layers, always stepping back to see the whole. You sure? She asked. Sure, I said. If I waver, it's fear, not me. Priya nodded. Then touch only to reveal, not to conceal. I let my shoulders drop and my breath even out. Daniel arrived early, pausing at the doorway to look at me through the veil. I thought you'd choose something, he whispered. I did, I said. I chose not to hide. He stood behind me. If you shake, squeeze my hand. If you need to stop, say it. I smiled. Are you afraid of what people will say? He shook his head. I'm only afraid you'll spend a lifetime living with a decision that wasn't yours. I spread the dress on the bed, fingers tracing the plain seams. No lace, no beads. Just a clean surface, so the stride decides the beauty. I thought of my mother. She'd call me stubborn, say I'm hurting the family, embarrassing the church, wasting the money from all those contracts. I inhaled and let those lines pass like wind through a curtain. My phone buzzed. Aunt June asked if I'd eaten. I texted back, "I'm okay. I need you in the front row." She replied, "I'll stand where the shadow falls." Marissa stood in the doorway, holding a box with a brown wig. "Try this," she said gently. "It's natural, no one will know." I turned. "I'll keep it as is." She frowned. "Mom won't like it." I kept my voice soft. "Mom can say what she believes is right. I'll do what I know is right." Her grip tightened on the box. Her nail tapped the cardboard with a dry click. In her eyes flickered something beyond confusion, as if she herself was surprised by the line that had just appeared. My mother entered. She set the box on the table and looked straight at me. "Valerie, if you wear this, everything will be easier." I answered slowly. "I won't trade ease for silence." Her lips thinned. "Don't turn yourself into a story." "I became a story last night," I said. "Today I'm just telling it properly." She turned away, leaving space for me to breathe. Priya pinned the veil so it wouldn't snag on the cuts. "Try walking," she said. I moved slowly, feeling the fabric skim my shoulders, the veil's edge brush my collarbone. Chin level, eyes forward, shoulders down. Priya coached. "Don't reflexively cover your head. Let the air pass." I repeated it to myself. A text from Nolan. The sound system was password locked, only he and Priya had it, the file renamed. I folded my phone and took out the scrap I wrote. "Don't apologize. Don't hedge. Name the truth." I read it 3 times. The photographer stepped in and paused. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said. The shutter clicked. I turned slightly so the late light fell along my cheek, the veil forming a soft halo around my head. In the lens, I wasn't a bride missing something. I was a woman shedding a layer to see herself more clearly. I understood why certain coverings soothe the wearer, not because they hide, but because they place a quiet frame around what you mean to keep. Daniel came back with a cold water bottle. He sat beside me and pressed it into my palm to cool it. "I was thinking of your grandmother," he said. "She wore a scarf every Sunday because it made her feel close to what she believed." I smiled. "I'm not sure God cares about scarves," I said. "But if he does, I hope he loves truth." We fell quiet, a calm settling like a thin blanket. I looked in the mirror one last time. The redness on my scalp had eased. I also saw what wasn't in the mirror: the road from Austin back here, the late nights of work, the dawn runs over the bridge, the calls with stubborn clients I still persuaded because I spoke in my true voice. Today would be the same. I'd walk into the sanctuary with that voice, even if I wasn't speaking. Outside, the church bells marked the rehearsal hour. I opened the door to let the breeze in. The veil fluttered. I touched it like touching my own forehead, not to soothe but to promise. I won't hide. No matter who looks, who speaks, what eyes try to force me to bow. I've chosen body and all, and the days remaining. Light is enough for me to begin. Evening slipped over Charleston like a dark silk shawl. The porch light glowed, insects thrummed. I sat at the dining table, the veil folded beside me, a glass of water in front of me. My mother set out butter cookies, trying to reassemble normal, but normal had left this house last night. "Valerie, if you're tired, turn in early," she said, in the voice she uses when she wants to arrange feelings. Howard flipped the paper, his eyes flicking to my hand, the one that no longer trembled. "Last night was just an accident," he said. "Tomorrow, wearing a wig would be best." I set the glass down. "An accident? Then why was the call log erased, and why is there adhesive on my bedroom doorknob?" My mother flinched slightly, then gave a soothing smile. "You're too sensitive. You yourself," she stalled, when I held up a tissue scrap with glue on it. "I didn't do this to myself," I said. "If I had, I wouldn't have needed a sedative." Howard stood, the chair thudding. "Enough, don't make things up." The doorbell rang. Aunt June walked in with her tote. "Hello, everyone," she said, eyes sweeping the room. She set a mint teapot on the stove, poured tea, then lightly touched my wrist. Go slowly. My phone buzzed. Priya had filtered the audio and needed to meet. I told my mother, I'm stepping onto the porch, then went out with my aunt. The river breeze was salty. What did Priya find? My aunt asked, opening her tote for a brown envelope. Adhesive used to secure a mic cable. I answered. The glue on the doorknob matches the mic clip that was left behind. My aunt nodded and handed me the envelope. And this, the Hartwell Pharmacy receipt. They still send them to me because my name's in the emergency contacts. Lorazepam paid for yesterday afternoon. I opened the envelope. On the paper, patient, Marissa Montgomery. Payment method, card under the name, Howard Reed. My hands went cold. He paid for it, I said softly. My aunt said slowly. And the prescription was picked up before any so-called accident. We were quiet for a few beats. I snapped photos, saved them to a hidden folder, and sent an encrypted copy to Priya and Nolan. You keep the original, I said. There's room in my home safe, my aunt replied. Back inside, Marissa leaned on the banister. She saw the envelope and her face shifted a shade. What's that? The menu. I slipped the envelope into my bag. Her smile trembled. My mother sat at the small table by the window, folding programs, and gestured me over. Valerie, can we talk privately? She lowered her voice. About last night, I know you're hurt. But if you tell people, they'll only remember that you caused a scene. A smart girl chooses what hurts her least. Hurt by truth or by silence, I asked. She met my eyes. You don't understand everything hanging over this family. I understand enough to know I'm not the price. Howard stood behind her, like a shadow. The reality is you're about to marry. Reputation isn't only yours. I looked at him. Reputation doesn't live on sedatives, he said. Marissa needs anxiety treatment. And her prescription was used to put me to sleep. Convenient for cutting, I replied. The air grew dense. My mother set the stapler down hard. Enough. Aunt June stepped in. Margaret, let Valerie choose how she walks into tomorrow. My mother smiled thinly. You always have so many opinions, my aunt answered. I have memories. I left the table. I'll be in the living room, I said. I sat in the armchair by the window where my grandmother used to knit. I opened my album, named a hidden folder, River Wind Lights, and locked it with a childhood passcode. A text from Priya, the beeps are a mixer test. The door eased open. Daniel stepped in. Am I interrupting? My mother softened. No, come in. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I gave a small nod. He sat beside me. Tomorrow is still your day, he said. And yours in the sense that you use your own voice. Daniel. We only want what's best for her. What's best for Valerie is decided by Valerie. After Daniel left, my mother gathered papers and told Marissa to sleep early so you'll look fresh. You, be careful what you say, my sister whispered. People remember for a long time. I asked, do you mean people or do you mean you? She didn't answer. Night settled in. I locked the balcony door and drew the curtains. My aunt sent a screenshot payment at 4:37 p.m. before I drank the tea. I moved the image to the hidden folder, noting, money time who? Priya video called. New info, she said. Riverside Security confirms someone used the stage last night, signed Reed. Could be Clayton Reed, financial advisor to Magnolia Trust. He wears a round lapel pin a lot. The name Reed hit me again, matching the payment card. The family photos in the hallway seemed to skew. Thank you, I said. Keep the files safe. Priya nodded. Nolan renamed the clip and tucked it in the piano setlist. When you nod the second time, we roll it. All inputs are locked. I shut the laptop and walked the hall. Each frame was a holiday, a certificate for Marissa, a day I made it home for dinner. I stopped at the one under the oak, my mother's hand on Marissa's shoulder, me standing slightly off an opening between us, as thin as a popped seam. In the kitchen, Howard closed the china cabinet. He watched me through the doorway, his look a negotiating question. I said nothing. I filled a glass and drank in small swallows. The cold water pulled me back to the present, details sliding into place. Adhesive, prescription, payment, lapel pin, beeps. Each link exposed a structure I'd responded, never been allowed to see. Back in my room, I laid the veil on the chair. I texted my aunt, "I won't wear a wig." She replied, "I know." I lay on my side, listening to the house breathe, with settling pipes humming, the fridge ticking evenly. Those sounds were the signature of habit, but habit no longer patched what had split open. On the porch, the camera sat mute, holding a layer of cold truth. And I, in this familiar room, understood that the model family's story showed its crack. It wasn't asking me to paste it over with a smile anymore. It was opening precisely in the silence between the soft words we'd just spoken. Dawn slid over the shingles like a thin sheet of water, and Charleston opened its eyes to distant bells. I stood on the porch, stared at the doorbell camera like a small, cold eye, and replayed the name Priya had just reported, Reed. Plenty of people share that last name, but only one had enough pull to stand in front of my house at midnight and say, "Cut it now." I pulled on a coat, let the salty wind soothe my burning scalp, then called Aunt June. Today, I needed to touch the fingerprints of power, not just hear explanations. Driving with my aunt, we passed under the oaks, the hanging moss swaying like an old stage curtain. "City Hall first," she said. "If it's Clayton Reed, public records will leave crumbs." I held the document pouch. Pharmacy receipt, camera stills, Priya's notes. Daniel texted briefly, "I'm nearby. Call if you need me." I replied with a single exclamation point, enough to tell him I was clear. I didn't want a pointless showdown. I wanted to see the operating structure, who signs, who approves, who calls it standard. City Hall sat on the brick square, cool inside and scented with old paper. I stopped at the oak board listing committees: community finance, planning, historic preservation. Third from the bottom, Clayton J. Reed, Chair, Neighborhood Finance Committee, Magnolia. Trust Partnership Advisor. The elderly clerk peered over her silver chain glasses. In an even tone, I asked for the list of licensed audio vendors. She handed over a slim packet and flipped to the last page, a slanted, decisive signature, C.J. Reed, with a note, "Oversight of Community Event Standards." I snapped a photo and sent it to Priya. We stepped out into the heat, and my aunt started the AC. "He touched the licensing door," she said. "And he surely touches a few more." I thought of the lines my mother loved about people who are good for the community. In Charleston, power rarely growls. It smiles, signs, sets rules, then disappears behind ribbon-cutting photos. We turned into First Harbor Baptist. The church smelled of wax and polished wood. Pastor Whitman was reviewing the program. Seeing the scarf on my head, his eyes softened. "Valerie, what do you need?" I asked directly about Magnolia Trust's influence. He hesitated, then invited me to sit where the stained glass cast red and green. "There are soft guidelines," he said slowly. "Some donors prefer things to be non-controversial. They call it respect for tradition." I didn't argue. I logged the unwritten rule: whoever balances the books will want a hand on the picture. Leaving the church, we stopped at Riverside Country Club. The hallway displayed black and white ball photos. The receptionist spoke gently. "Mr. Reed keeps a satellite office here, working on funding projects." Satellite office means a spare key. A spare key means appearing anytime without raising eyebrows. Under the oaks in the lot, Daniel waited with 2 iced teas. "Do you want me to speak to Reed directly?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to understand the structure before I pry it." Aunt June said, "No one knocks down a wall without knowing where the pillars are." Daniel nodded, his warm hand resting a bead at my back like an anchor. That afternoon we went to the public library. The AC hummed softly, pages turned like light rain. I opened my laptop and searched Magnolia Trust, gentle slogans, funding conditions, and one vague line about a commitment to exemplary image. A note from last month's meeting appeared. Standardized process with the Finance Committee and Riverside's Event Coordination Board. At the end of the line, the initials, CJR. I saw the pillars show: money, licensing, rules, venue. Priya sent the filtered audio. The beeps clear as a fork striking crystal, the low laugh no longer buried by crickets. Listen to the silence after cut it now, she texted. I put on headphones. The pause was long enough for a nod, for a cloth to open, for hair to fall quiet as leaves. I hit stop. Last night had a director. Val, my aunt said, we need someone who reads the fine print. She called Aaron Whitfield, the young attorney who'd helped the church before. The cafe overlooked the docks, the wind carrying salt and roasting coffee. I summarized no extras, no gaps. Aaron took quick notes, slowing at each milestone. Criminally, he said, there are signs of involuntary drugging. Civilly, grounds for damages. Community-wise, pressure will come. But if you want to touch the system's core, you need a chain linking one person's influence to processes and standards. On the way home, the sky went red like a shaken scarf. My notes thickened. Read at every junction: vendor approvals, a satellite office, soft guidelines, CJR initials. I wasn't facing a wall, I was facing a revolving door. The problem was picking the right moment to step and who'd be standing on the other side. That evening, my mother called me into the living room. The lamp's warm shade made everything look frosted. She said, Clayton helped the neighborhood through storm seasons. He's strict but for the common good. I kept my voice even. People working for the common good don't laugh on a porch while someone's daughter is being shaved bald. My mother's eyelid twitched. You're pushing this too far. Or it went too far the moment someone poured a drug in my tea? She fell silent. I stepped onto the porch. The camera's green dot blinked, patient as a witness. A far-off ship horn rolled out long. I set my palm on the doorframe, feeling the wood warm in the night air, and thought about how power touched my house, not loud, just a polite finger on the hinge, turning things to its advantage. My part was to follow every scratch, every pen mark, every beep, until my questions were answered clearly. When the bells at First Harbor Baptist chimed the first time, I stood behind the dark wooden doors, my hand on the veil's edge like on a forehead. Stained glass light fell in red-green bands, brushed my shoulder, then rested on my scalp like a border. Priya fixed the last pin and whispered, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Nolan texted, system locked. Q. Second touch on the veil. Daniel at the threshold. I'm here. I nodded, my heartbeat fell into line. The piano shifted to the processional. The doors opened. Candle wax scent washed in. I stepped onto the stone aisle. The saints in the windows slid by like an audience. The main doors widened, a hush cracked, and then rolled back. I walked behind Aunt June, slowly, chin level, shoulders loose. The veil fluttered not to hide, only to guide light. Pews were full. My mother in the front row, Howard's head tilted. Marissa clutched the bouquet till her knuckles blanched. I told myself, don't hide, don't bow. High air lifted the veil, polished wood mingled with rustling silk. Pastor Whitman waited, the service book open. We gathered to witness. The pastor's voice was low and calm. I looked at Daniel at the far end of the aisle. In that moment, everything receded until there were just 2 people standing on 2 shores. The prayer spoke of faithfulness, of true light. I heard it like a sound engineer sliding frequencies until a voice landed true. The congregation Saturday. The space settled. I touched the veil once to adjust the pin away from a tender spot, then lowered my hand. My mother shot me a look fast as a blade. The night flashed, the bitter tea, the tilting room, the opening buzz. I let it pass. At the vows, Daniel stepped up. He didn't shield me or reach for the veil, he simply set his hand over mine. I spoke my promise, voice steady. When the pastor said, "Before you exchange rings," someone's silk rustled in the front row. Aunt June cocked her head, as if catching a tiny note. The stained glass light shifted, pouring straight onto the veil in a soft halo. I lifted my hand and touched the veil a second time. To the room, it was a gentle gesture. To Nolan, the signal. 2 breaths passed. From above, a small beep fell. Not a shriek, more like a bright note opening a door to memory. Then a pause long enough for everyone to know what was coming. And that man's voice, low, lined with a dry chuckle, dropped into the sanctuary. "Cut it now, or Magnolia Trust closes the books in the morning." No seats scraped, no bodies moved. Nolan had set the volume just enough to thread the sound into columns and glass. On the screen, the porch appeared. The angled view, a hand reaching the cabinet, the white cloth opening, a flash of metal. Marissa's breath hitched. Howard froze mid-stand. My mother didn't move. I didn't turn around. It wasn't me telling it anymore. It was the event speaking in its own voice. Marissa's voice rang out. "If you don't do it, I'm leaving tonight." Then the insects swelled, and the clippers buzzed, the very tone my skin still remembered. I stood straight as a beam set into its mortise. Daniel tightened his hand around mine, not to pull me from the storm, only to remind me the ground was here. A few chairs creaked, a cough was stifled. The pastor closed his book, not stepping in. At the right, Priya folded her arms. Aunt June inclined her head. The recording continued, my mother's voice. "Horse, don't make me choose." The man answered, "We don't have time." A short burst of laughter. Nolan had cut the tail, but it stayed rough enough to snag the ear, and like a frame fold, the stained glass light poured entirely onto my head, circling the veil into a thin halo. On the projection screen, the hand opening the cloth froze in a frame. The frame of the porch sat inside the frame of the church, the two scenes layered like two sides of the same door. Whispers rose like a tide. Someone in the back row shot up, then sat down. Howard turned to my mother, lips moving. Marissa looked at me, her eyes pleading and angry at once. I held my breath, letting the wave pass without pulling me with it. The sound cut out on the beat. Nolan returned the room to stillness. No filler music, only a silence thick as early snow. The pastor lifted his head, gentle-voiced. "Light doesn't ruin the morning, it only shows us where we're standing." He looked at me and Daniel. "Do you want to continue your vows, Valerie?" I nodded. Daniel nodded. The vows went on, no longer skimming the surface. Each word left my lips like a stone set into a stream. When we exchanged rings, the scratches on my hand burned. I didn't pull away. In the front row, my mother bowed her head for the first time. I didn't know what she was thinking. I only saw the pin at her shoulder gleam under the stained glass, the same glint that flashed in the white cloth last night. The piano returned. The pastor smiled. "You may kiss." Applause rose. I didn't look at the room. I looked at the door, where Noon Light stood waiting. We turned down the aisle. A few soft calls of my name, one stifled sniffle. The veil skimmed my scalp on the breeze again. I touched it lightly, not as a signal, only to thank that thin film of mesh for helping the light stand still long enough for those who needed to see what had just opened to see it more clearly. In the foyer, ordinary sounds returned. Heels, a child holding back tears, doors opening and closing. Daniel asked softly, "You okay?" I nodded. From a distance, Nolan gave a thumbs up. Priya placed a hand over her chest. Aunt June stood slightly off to the side. I glanced toward the front row. My mother hadn't stood. Howard was steadying himself. Marissa turned her face away. No one spoke, but everything that needed saying had just been said, not with mouths, but with light, a beep, and a chain of sounds finding the right room to ring in. I squeezed Daniel's hand. Wax and polished wood braided into one scent. Outside, sun slanted across the porch, painting a long stripe on red brick. I knew the next part wouldn't be easy, but at least the door had just been reset on its hinges. It opened toward straight, no longer wobbling under hands hidden behind the curtain. As the last claps faded into the hallway, Daniel and I stood between the sanctuary doors and the foyer. The cool of old stone seeped into my wrists, soothing the hot spots. Faces that had just witnessed the truth changed tones. A few people avoided my eyes. A few gave the faintest nods like apologies. "Want to catch your breath a minute?" Daniel asked. I nodded. Priya stepped up. "The line is safe. If you're ready, we bring part 2 at the reception." I looked at the salon drawing its curtains of light. "Time to speak in words," I said. Just enough to link the points. In the reception room, white linens and crystal glasses lined up straight. The MC set out the mic. Howard leaned into my mother. She nodded, then came toward me. "Let me give a few opening words to lighten things," she said. I shook my head. "No opening words. We need the truth." She paused a beat, then stepped back to the front row. Aunt June stood by the stage. I handed her the mic and caught Priya's eyes. Nolan flashed the clean line light. My aunt cleared her throat. "I'm June Bennett, the bride's aunt. This morning, due to a mix-up, I received a duplicate receipt from Hartwell Pharmacy. At 4:37 p.m. yesterday, lorazepam was paid for with Mr. Howard Reed's card. The prescription is under Marissa Montgomery." She held the printout for the projector. The room went silent, sand just smoothed flat. Howard sprang up. "A system misunderstanding. I fronted the money for Marissa's anxiety script." My aunt said, "The prior issue was 4 months ago, with a note pre-RN before dental procedure." A small hiss escaped someone. I looked at the wall clock trembling with the AC. Priya switched the frame. A close-up of the mic clip dropped under the riverside stage, a strip of black tape wrapped halfway around. Beside it, the reflection of a lapel pin in the porch glass. "Tools of someone at home on a stage," Priya said. Nolan zoomed. The words, "council guest," along the lower edge came clear. Chairs shifted ever so slightly. My mother swayed, gripping her skirt hem. Howard steadied her shoulder. He tried to stay calm. "This is a wedding. Don't turn it into a courtroom." I took the mic. "Yes, this is a wedding, and it's also a place filled with people once invited to believe in our family's image. Today, that image needs to speak human." A platinum-haired woman stood Elaine Harper, head of the Ladies' Auxiliary. 3 months ago, backstage at the fundraiser, Mr. Clayton Reed told me, sometimes the young need a lesson in humility before the community. He called it a right. I laughed. Today I see I shouldn't have. The name slid through the room like a paper blade. Howard hurried. "Clayton never." Miss Harper raised a hand. "I'm not assigning blame, but I confirm that language exists, and it's left the meeting rooms for real life." The current changed direction. People who'd been quiet leaned together to whisper. A couple of Daniel's friends came over. "Do you need us as witnesses for when the clip played?" We were in the 3rd row. I nodded and gave them Aaron Whitfield's number. Priya sent time-stamped images: reflection, lapel pin, mic clip. "Save in 3 places," I texted. "Don't leave a single path." The MC looked to me for help to steer the program. I signaled the band to play light jazz. In the soft horns, I went to the front row. My mother lifted her reddened eyes. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice no longer sharp. I lowered the mic, just enough for 2 people to hear. One true sentence without a but. Her lips trembled. "I'm afraid. People will say we didn't raise our child right." I answered slowly. "You just gave them a different sentence." Howard cut in. "You don't understand the ties. Magnolia Trust is," I said, "a community fund, not a law against dignity." He looked at me like a miscalculated sum, turned away, and pulled out his phone. My aunt murmured, "He's calling someone." Nolan on the private channel. Mike is now isolated from the aux board. No one can kill it but me. Daniel came over. Give your statement right now, short, clear, then let people eat dinner. Don't keep them inside the tension. I nodded. Priya slid a scrap into my hand. 3 bullet points. What was done to me divided by who paid for the script divided by forward evidence to proper authorities. No extra emotion. I returned to the stage. I'll say 3 things, I began. 1. This shaved head isn't a fashion choice. Last night I was drugged and shaved. 2. The prescription was paid for yesterday afternoon, with Mr. Howard Reed's card, while the script bears my sister's name. 3. All audio and images that just played will be turned over to the church and relevant authorities. And today, please eat your dinner. Daniel and I will still dance our first dance, we promised. I finished. The band picked up smoothly, weaving an easy melody. The air didn't explode, it shifted, like a river changing course. People looked at each other, not to tally winners and losers, but to check what they'd been believing all this time. Miss Harper sat down, clutching her purse. My mother bowed deeply. Marissa kept her spine straight, her eyes darkening. Let's go, Daniel said softly. We stepped onto the wood floor. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat beneath the fabric. The song opened the path, not syrupy. A few people clapped in time. I heard Aunt June's soft laugh, heard Nolan release a breath, heard Priya flip her notebook, her after-storm habit. The song ended. The faces weren't the same as they'd been at noon. An older gentleman came forward, placed a hand over his heart, and bowed instead of speaking. A little girl with a flower crown looked at me for a long time, then bowed, as if she'd found something new to learn. I didn't see Clayton Reed. Either he hadn't come, or he was somewhere behind a side door, counting reactions. Thinking that, my back straightened. The current had shifted, it didn't need to break a dam. It only needed room to follow its true slope, carrying off what no longer had a grip, and in the stream, I realized my hand had stopped shaking. In the music, I saw the light hold steady on the veil. Afternoon slid over the oak canopies, the room's music sinking low. Daniel, Aunt June, and I slipped out of the congratulating circle into Riverside's quieter corridor. Cool air flowed, polished wood mingling with old lily scent. Priya texted, "Aaron's in the small reading room, 2nd floor." Daniel nodded. Let's go. The reading room had a glass door, looking out over the lake. Aaron Whitfield stood, took off his glasses, and set a charcoal briefcase on the table. Sorry, I didn't get to congratulate you, he said quietly. This needs priority. I sat, my aunt pulled a chair. Priya stood by the outlet, ready to open her laptop. Aaron opened the case. On the top sheet, the Magnolia Trust logo in watermark. A partnership memorandum between Magnolia Trust and the Neighborhood Finance Committee, he said. MOU amended 3 months ago, signed by Clayton J. Reed. Riverside co-signed. First Harbor Baptist received a rider. The heading read, Coordination Mechanism for Supporting Community Events. Sounds harmless. Below it stressed standards, harmony, non-controversial. The table of contents listed, Media Image Standards, Trusted Vendor List. A Reputation Crisis Management Process. In Annex, C was a phrase that chilled me, Social Interference Reduction Measures during Ceremonial Occasions. In the margin, the pencil initials, CJR. Deliberately vague wording, Aaron said. Paired with your evidence, people will see how it's interpreted. He laid down more pages, briefing emails, lines about ensuring no objectionable content. Plus technical points of contact. A handwritten Riverside address, side door project key. Rack B. Priya glanced at me. Nolan had found the mic clip at Rack B. How did this reach you? I asked. Aaron gave a tired smile. An internal complaint channel. Someone couldn't stomach how soft guidelines were being abused. Daniel exhaled, like releasing a stone he'd held too long. Aunt June turned to the funding annex. In the top right corner. A signature spot for family beneficiary representative, beneath it Lorraine Albright, my mother's maiden name with the title volunteer representative for the Montgomery family. The date matched the week my mother made me. Change photos to a classic style. A thin stitch ran through the points. Signature, funding conditions, reads presence as invisible glue. I don't want to execute anyone, I said. I just want to end the wrong reading of the word. Community. Aaron nodded. To bend the frame, we ask public questions and force written answers. He handed over a disclosure request template, meeting minutes with Reed, vendor approval lists, technical directives, after-hours facility use agreements. File it tomorrow morning. I'll sign as pro bono counsel. Priya opened the filtered audio file, aligning the porch camera timestamps to the lapel pin reflection still. The low-frequency profile of the laugh matches Reed's public mic sample in the City Hall auditorium, she said. Aaron wrote, potential match, not concluded. Daniel touched the back of my chair. Does the MOU bind personal responsibility? Aaron flipped to Clause 3. Execution belongs to an interagency coordination team, represented by the Finance Committee chair. If there's abuse, the chair can't say I only advised. I swallowed slowly. The skeleton stood out. Magnolia supplied money, Reed tied the lines, Riverside provided the stage. The church provided moral backdrop. My family supplied the story, and I became the noise to be reduced. There's one more layer, my aunt said. She laid down a yellowing envelope, soft handwriting, Evelyn Albright, my grandmother, a letter to my mother long ago, recounting how Magnolia began as a small fund to help widows and daughters learn sewing. It used to be made of hands, not machinery, my aunt said softly. I ran a finger along the paper edge. The old scent pricked my eyes not from sorrow, but from remembering a decent way to use words. Music from the hall drifted in. The MC invited guests to dine. I closed the case. Aaron, help me file the requests and keep copies safe. I will, he said. Priya packed her cables. Daniel opened the door. Before we left, I looked at the stack, one side of Magnolia under reading room lights, hand stitching visible, then wrapped in a cold layer of plastic. Back downstairs, the lights were warm, plates and glasses chimed again. My mother sat angled. Howard tapped his phone. Marissa looked at me like someone who'd lost a password and wanted to relearn how to speak. I took a sip of water, the cool traveling from my throat to the place where unsaid sentences are stored. The glass touched down with a small sound, like a period at the end of a long clause. Valerie, my mother called, her voice gentler. Let me see the papers from earlier? My aunt handed her a copy of the MOU, pointing to the signed annex. My mother read, her hand shaking at her own name. I thought it was a soft formality, she said. I thought it was just support. I kept silent. Sometimes I thought is how power asks for a signature with compliments. A breeze slipped through the tall windows, brushing the veil on the chair. I remembered my grandmother teaching me to stitch. Good seams are the ones no one sees, but that hold the shape. Magnolia began as that seam. In hands like reeds, it turned into top stitching that pressed every fold into a mold. Aaron stood. Tomorrow morning, I'll go with you to file. Tonight, let the event continue. Two things can coexist, attending the party and looking straight on. Thank you, I said. He shook Daniel's hand, nodded to my aunt and Priya, and left. I pictured the red brick steps up to the old building where I'd set the request like a wedge in the revolving door. Daniel bent close to my ear. You're not alone. I know, I said. I looked at the head table, my mother holding the copy, Howard turning away. In the clink of cutlery, Magnolia appeared like a big table, who sits at the head, who works the kitchen, who carries dishes, who washes plates, and who's told to be quiet so dinner stays elegant. This time, I'd add a place for truth, right in the center, no embroidered cloth necessary. The next morning, Charleston lay under a thin mist, like a damp cloth on the rooftops. I got up before the bells, my scalp still tender. On the table, the Magnolia Trust file sat still like an unfinished script. I touched the cover and told myself, from here, I'll rewrite it. I took a deep breath. Down in the kitchen, I brewed coffee. My mother sat by the counter, eyes puffy. She held out a mug, slow-voiced. I thought it was only a soft agreement. I answered, "You signed because you believed a compliment. I don't blame you. But I will fix it." Howard walked in, dark tie. He spoke like he was nailing a sign to the wall. "Don't blow everything up." I set the mug down. No explosions, just opening. Messages came in. Aunt June said Aaron had finished the filings. Priya said Nolan had backed everything up, Daniel wrote. "I'm waiting on the steps." I nodded to myself, like stamping a seal. Before leaving, I stood on the porch looking at the doorbell camera. Last night it was a witness, today opened the sentence. I pressed my hand to the wooden frame, remembering stained glass light resting on the veil, the thin needle of a beep. I would set it again, on the beat. City Hall in the morning smelled of old paper. Aaron waited by the glass window. "File 3 packets," he said. "Funding, after-hours use of Riverside and Finance Committee minutes involving Mr. Reed." I signed. The clerk stamped received, the thud neat as a little backstage drum. On the steps, Daniel handed me a paper bag and a bottle of water. "Breakfast and a pep talk," he said. Priya leaned in. "This afternoon, let's turn the outdoor music into a fundraiser." I nodded. "Keep the strings, invite donations to the Women's Center." I texted the MC to cancel the stacked group photo segment and give that time to the music. She replied, "Bride decides. I'll rearrange." The story changed point of view. I wasn't asking permission, I was editing. Back at Riverside, Priya and I checked outlets and mic lines. Nolan opened the back door to the lawn. "String lights are good. Backup transmitter tested." Priya handed me an indigo ribbon. "New cue," she smiled. "Tie it on the mic to shift to the fundraiser playlist." I said, a soft pivot, no fanfare. Aaron texted the response deadline. I took a screenshot and dropped it into the revolving door folder. My mother called, her voice slow as if returning each word. "Are you really doing a fundraiser?" "Yes," I said. "For the Women's Counseling Center." She was quiet, then softly. "I used to go there with your grandmother to sew." At noon, I opened my laptop to write. Not a speech, not a lament. One short page, 4 paragraphs, why I'm still dancing, what I'm keeping, where I'm sending the bouquet money instead of favors, and a reminder that I'm not the only story. I cut extra adjectives, kept the sentences short and even. On reread, I struck a reflexive apology that had popped up out of habit. The page stood steadier without asking for pardon. Daniel read slowly, his shoulders easing at the last line. "Enough," he said. Priya texted, "Nolan is packaging the files for the authorities. No more plays during the party." I answered, "Let the work go to the right place." My phone buzzed again. "Miss Valerie? I'm Ruth Ann Keller from the Women's League. I'd like to donate anonymously to the center. Do they accept it through Magnolia?" I watched sunlight fall in patches. "Ma'am, this time we go direct," I said. She chuckled softly. "The small gate is sometimes faster." I saved her number, like marking a shortcut. Afternoon touched the doorway. The photographer met me in the hall. She lowered her camera. "May I take a backstage portrait, to keep for you alone until you choose?" I nodded. She set me by the brick wall, the veil brushing my shoulder. I let my face settle into its steady state, calm when there are too many voices. I changed into soft shoes and walked onto the lawn. River wind carried salt, lifting the veil into a thin streak. Nolan hung paper lanterns. Priya checked zip ties. Daniel set 2 folding chairs under the oak where my grandmother used to sit. I tried the seat, watched the water ripple, and reminded myself, don't chase eyes, follow breath. Another text from Aaron. A brief meeting with a church representative after the reception was set. I replied, good. I didn't need grand statements or polite nods. I needed schedules, names, signatures, timestamps, small dots, so the story wouldn't be dragged back into the blur. The sky deepened. The first lights came on, golden dots like popping corn. I tied the indigo ribbon around the mic and rehearsed the gesture. Lift, lower, tie, release. Priya nodded. Cue is clear. In the prep tent, I opened the wooden cabinet and took out the engraved metal name badge. Today, it would be the tempo marker for a new scene. I pinned it to my chest, breathed in, and felt my lungs full without weight. Outside, the strings tuned, Nolan's hand brushed the last button, and Daniel turned his back to block the wind for me. I stood. The old page closed without a sound. The new one opened with no drum, just one breath in, one breath out, and the small flag at the end of the lawn flicking as if in agreement. I walked the edge of the lawn, hearing glasses touch, spoons click on plates, metallic sounds striking time. My mother stood on the porch. She looked at me, then spoke just loud enough for two. If you want, I'll sit in the back. I shook my head. Sit wherever you like. I only ask you not to stand between me and the mic. At the long table, Marissa shaped the bouquet. She looked up, lips pressed. You're really going to do it? Yes, I said. Not a performance. Just music and a donation box. She lowered her eyes and whispered, if you say my name, I'll. I cut in gently. I'll speak the truth, not a list of crimes. Marissa set the bouquet in the ciste vase, her hand trembling a small circle. From the back lawn, Nolan raised his hand. 5 minutes. Priya draped a thin shawl over me so the wind wouldn't whip the tender skin. Daniel adjusted the veil pins. I looked toward the water's edge. In the reflection, a shaved-headed woman stood in warm light, holding a mic tied with indigo. I felt calmer than the woman in the reflection by one notch. Ready? Daniel asked. Ready, I said. And this time, in my own voice. My story pauses here, but I know its echo will keep many of you thinking. Because behind the hair that was cut off, behind the schemes and the hurt, there's a larger question. In a family, what truly holds us together, real love, or just the outer shell? I believe that sometimes a single moment of facing the truth can change the course of a life. I would truly love to hear your thoughts. If you were in my place, would you stay silent to preserve appearances, or stand up and speak the truth, knowing it might crack the closest bonds? Your perspective becomes the next chapter that turns this story from just mine into a mirror for each person's own journey. And if this story touched your heart, please follow the channel so you won't miss the next one's real slices of family life, where trust, betrayal, and the power to heal are laid bare with honesty.